Welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience, brought to you by Taylor Healthcare. Subscribe now and stay on the forefront of the digital healthcare revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience podcast presented by Taylor Healthcare. I'm your host, Chris Civitarice, and today we're joined by Thad Price, CEO of Austin-based Ready Set Hire and Talroo. Ready Set Hire serves small to medium-sized businesses, franchises, and recruiters seeking to hire frontline and essential workers. It's powered by Talroo, the multiple award-winning talent matching platform for enterprise designed for sourcing essential and hourly workers. Welcome, Thad. It's great to have you on the show.
Chris, great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely. And to start, I'm hoping you can share a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing at Talroo and Ready Set Hire.
Yeah, well, I've spent my entire professional career, 20 years at this point, in job search and matching and helping, of course, job seekers and employers find the right team members to grow their business. Of course, the idea of finding the right job should be a win-win between an employer and a job seeker. And so here at Talroo, we're investing heavily in ensuring that, we are making this matchmaking even more successful in the industry because, as recruiters in staffing and how we think about the world in HR, really recruiting and finding the right candidate for the right job is life-changing in many cases for job seekers and employers and businesses alike.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously healthcare is its own sort of unique animal when it comes to staffing. And we've heard so much about, the staffing shortages, people leaving, the healthcare profession, especially on the provider side, but also on, some of the administrative roles as well. And I have to imagine that world continues to sort of shift. So I'm wondering, can you explain a little bit how, Ready, Set, Hire, Talroo and these concepts are playing out in your world, and what shifts are you seeing, and what strategy does it require for healthcare to be successful here?
Well, I think the first way we have to think about it is the candidate, the talent holds the cards, has the power today. And that's a shift that I believe that's happened over the last number of years. And that's just not healthcare, right? That's in every industry over the last few years as we think about the future and we think about the labor market in general. But of course, it's been even more prevalent in healthcare over the last probably 5 to 10 years as we think about the options that people have to work, how they work, where they work, and the opportunities that are available. Some of this, of course, is because of baby boomers and how we think about the baby boomers retiring and a lot of those positions in healthcare, education, and others, leaving the workforce. A lot of that happened during COVID crisis and, of course, post-pandemic as well. So when we think about this shift that's happening, a lot of this is macro factors in the labor market, but then also just the high needs. So think about it this way, right? You have more people in need of healthcare services than ever just because of population. And then many of those people in that environment are leaving the workforce. They're retiring. So this is a perfect storm of what you would expect to happen in just a tight market for healthcare talent. Now, in the middle of that, think about all the ways we're redefining how people work and how people want to work. And, job seekers, talent, holding all the cards, having all the power. That's the predicament that we're in right now. And a lot of businesses are looking to solve that. So from our perspective, because the talent holds all the power in many cases, it's very important to be more proactive in how we recruit and treat, the process of recruiting and the process of finding talent, believe it or not, is more of a sales process, more of thinking about like signing a deal or closing a deal, thinking about that entire process that happens from marketing to sales to signature, all in terms of recruiting and how we think about purveying the talent that we need to grow our businesses, especially in healthcare.
It's really interesting. There's a lot has been said in terms of, the consumerism in healthcare through the lens of the patient becoming more of a consumer. But what you're describing is that the candidates are increasingly becoming kind of consumers in and of themselves.
Absolutely, holding the power, right? To you think about from a consumer perspective, buy where you'd like to buy, right? There are certain things you're looking for when you are looking to buy a product and engage with a brand and make an investment. And the same thing is true with candidates, and the same thing is true with talent, is they're making an investment in their future. And with so many options that are out there, just like in more of a product and sales driven environment, you have a lot of options where you can buy products. You have a lot of options on where you can decide to grow your career and provide value to the employer more than ever. And so what we see is this change that's been happening, and it's been unfolding for a number of years now, but even again more pronounced given the shifts in the labor market and just many additional macro factors that we're faced with now in the economy.
Makes perfect sense. And the other thing about healthcare that I have to imagine is true is that it's highly regionalized. It's not like you can hire, a nurse, for example, that lives in California and telecommutes to New York to help at the bedside. So I'm curious about how those kind of factors, regionality, the regional supply and demand, how all that plays into what you're seeing and how it affects your process.
Well, we're seeing that people are recruiting where the talent is and being more aggressive at bringing talent and moving talent to a particular location. Give you a great example. So, I'm here in Austin. My mom and dad had a home in a suburb here outside of Austin, a little town called Dripping Springs, and their neighbor was a nurse here in Austin and moved to California because of a terrific package, relocation package, bonus package, and made that. You don't hear a lot of people moving from Texas to California,
That's
right?
the
You hear
inverse,
a
right?
lot of people, yeah, but bonuses, all the things, money, all the things that people are looking for, and probably a great employer as well. All of those prevail in that market when you're looking to win talent. And from a healthcare provider perspective, you need to be able to ensure that you can staff effectively. If not, that there are a number of consequences, of course, to the level of care you can provide and how you can effectively run your business and grow your business.
It's really interesting. I have to imagine then that's a pretty big shift where, a local health system was probably recruiting fairly locally in the history of their organization, whereas now it sounds like the playing field is opened up a little bit more, and that's part of what you're seeing out there.
Absolutely. We've seen bonuses increase. We've seen relocation and how we think about assistance that's needed. That's one of the big drivers that we've seen. We've also seen, when I said earlier about how the talents and in control has more power than before, we've seen these models appear. And, we call this almost like a digital wave in how we think about how you staff for healthcare providers. And that is this idea of more marketplaces and that look a lot like, Uber and Lyft for how people find work and how people generate income. And that's interesting too to see unfold, especially in healthcare, because, there's so much demand right now to find talent. And of course, talent's looking for more flexibility than ever before. And so, how do you bridge the gap and how do you create an environment and a marketplace that embraces all these ways, that people are looking to find talent and, of course, all these ways that provides the value that talent's looking for and how they want to work. And that idea of work is being redefined across every industry, which is fascinating when you think of marketplaces and how the world of work is changing and transforming into something very different than we've ever seen.
It's interesting. I feel like people don't necessarily associate healthcare with part of like the gig marketplace, transformation. Has that been an evolution? Obviously, we have lots of companies that do contract nursing and things like that. But is that shift really just being driven by sort of the supply and demand factor, or are there other things behind it?
I think there are other things. I think that we will see a move in every industry to more of this marketplace oriented shift based experience. And that's driven because people want more control over when they want to work. And I think, when we think of the typical delivery marketplaces or the rideshare marketplaces that exist today and that have been very successful over the last 5 to 10 years, it affords people the ability to work when they want to work, get paid, immediately in many cases, and provides what I refer to as transactional income.
Right.
And it sounds simple, but with these marketplaces, you're not going to be able to grow your career. You're simply looking to generate income in a transactional environment. And I think the businesses that embrace this idea of career growth and growing with a company will be the ones that win, because the marketplaces afford you the ability to work when you want to work. And you have to be different than that in order to compete and ensure that you're able to retain your team members. So, I think that across industries, you will see more of this, and you are seeing more of this, whether it's again, marketplaces like the delivery, rideshare marketplaces, healthcare staffing, contingent labor, even some of the newer marketplaces, fiber that have entered, and you're seeing this across different verticals. So, and it's already sort of existed in healthcare more than some of the other verticals. So that's one of the reasons why I think you're seeing acceleration of staffing looking more like a marketplace in healthcare than probably other verticals.
It's really interesting, and part of the other, a piece of the puzzle I have to imagine with healthcare. When you're on the front lines of healthcare, so to speak, in terms of nursing and so on and so forth, a lot of it is shift based, right? So, like, what are the differences, I guess, in the shift based sort of way of thinking around marketplaces, and how are healthcare facilities out there ensuring that they have access to these on demand staffing options?
Well, I think a lot of these options have been born out of more of staffing businesses. When you think of the staffing businesses that are current providers, you see that movement, and you see a lot of focus around companies looking to leverage those marketplaces more successfully than maybe they are. But I think the big thing we have to think about is to constantly test and be open to new ideas and how we think about staffing and how we think about recruiting. And so, what I would always say to teams, especially in healthcare, is be curious. Be curious about how we think about recruiting, what marketplaces and providers are available, ask questions within your network, and be willing to test. And I think that that's very important in this dynamic environment that we're in redefining, the labor market in ways that we haven't seen, in our lifetimes, which is pretty exciting, to really think about this idea of how we work in the future, especially in healthcare and serving the needs of the population.
Absolutely, and obviously, Talroo is bringing new technology to bear to help with this. So I'm wondering, talk a little bit about how software tools are out there helping and overcoming the recruitment challenges, and I guess when an organization is looking at injecting technology into this process, what are some of the special features or elements of a program that organizations should look for?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about our business is more of a traditional, let's call it job advertising, job board experience. And I think that's very important to call out. We are not a healthcare marketplace that's kind of reshaping what staffing looks like in more of a shift-based environment. So there are a number of great products out there. Of course, ShiftKey is one of them. There are many others that are redefining the way in which healthcare facilities find talent and the way in which healthcare professionals connect directly in that environment. So it's important to say what we're not, right? We're not in that environment. Where we are spending a lot of time is finding ways in which we can help job seekers and healthcare professionals find the right jobs through more of a traditional job board experience. And what I mean by that is connecting with applicant tracking systems, driving candidates, qualifying candidates, so that at the end of the day you're spending your time speaking with qualified and credentialed candidates, and not candidates that are window shoppers and simply looking to apply to many jobs. And through that, what we think is important, as I said earlier, is to build more of a sales process oriented with connecting with talent. And what I mean by that is, you know, one of the things is speed is so important. So when someone applies to a job, if you aren't connecting with them immediately, then you may lose them, especially in a tight market, like we're in right
For
now.
sure.
So same thing is to connect with sales. If someone is visiting your site, or if someone is browsing your store and you aren't providing a level of service to them needed, and checking on how you can be helpful and not communicating, you will probably lose that customer in the same way that you would lose talent. So that's what I mean by that. So how we think about it is, how can we automate and help healthcare providers be more effective at that process? How do I write a great job ad? How do I ensure that I'm paying the correct amount based on dynamics in a market? How can I be intentional around the communication with prospects, with talent? How can I even book an interview without the ping pong that happens through email back and forth,
Right.
right? How can, because that's ultimately what businesses want, right? You want to talk to a human, and I do say human because of all the things we're doing in an industry to automate a lot of that process. But at the end of the day, from an interview perspective, you want to talk to someone and you want to develop a relationship and you want to learn more about them and then make a decision to hire them or not. And our thought process around this is that we can build technology in every step of the way, and integrate technology in every step of the way to help influence and bridge that connection and make that more efficient. And if we make that more efficient, we can increase the efficiency across the board of recruiting, and we can create a dazzling candidate experience. And when you create a dazzling candidate experience, it's like a dazzling customer experience
Right.
that will provide an immense amount of payback long term for businesses, especially because candidates are your consumers in many ways.
That's right. You touched on something. So, to your point, and I completely agree as somebody who has had his swings and misses on candidates, and also some great home runs. The most important thing is, finding people that match the profile and all that good stuff, and ultimately just getting to talk to them. But I also feel that, we've got all this wonderful technology that's coming in terms of generative AI, that's transforming a lot of the, especially administrative tasks. So I'm curious, there has to be some puts and takes, I would imagine, with generative AI in staffing and recruiting, as there are in like literally every other aspect of life. So I'm curious what you're seeing there. What are some of the, I guess, practical examples of how AI is helping the recruiting process, and what are some of the potential kind of pitfalls that people have to look out for?
Absolutely. So, first, I would say is when we think about writing and communicating, generative AI is great to jumpstart that process. Writing and communicating with candidates, it's fantastic at that. Do I think it's a good idea to not proof, or to generate and click send? No, I think that in any environment, it's a way to jumpstart, and that's how we like to think about it, right? We're jumpstarting it. We're not solving the problem completely. We're just giving you a head start that otherwise that would be challenging potentially for you, or take a lot of time to start. So that's the way I like to think about it. But I think of it as, how can we inject more efficiency in every step of the process that may have problems today? And a great example is interview booking, and how we think what's available and what's not available. Matching. Do you have the credentials? Do you have the requirements for this job, or do you not have the requirements for this job? One simple, not simple, but one feature that we launched that we like is, you know, you provide a resume and we will give you a quick judgment based on the job description of a job if we think you're a fit or not.
Interesting.
And, from a job seeker's perspective, are we going to get it right, 100% of the time? No. Is it a way to just simply save you a little time to give a quick judgment on what this job may have and what this job may not have based on your resume? Sure. And that's a helpful experience. And that's how I think we should think about it, whether you're a job seeker or whether you're an employer, and thinking about solving small problems. Now, the flip side of this is that if we completely rethink the entire hiring process, that gets really exciting. However, I don't think we're ready for that yet, because I still think there are a lot of unknowns, and the technology is changing so quickly. And because of that, I think that it's important for us to use to use generative AI where it's important in our existing processes to facilitate our current connections and how we think about connecting job seekers, the right job seekers with the right employers. And, the other thing that I would say to this is what gets me very excited about this industry is we've spent so much time on, is this job seeker right for this job? And I think that the huge opportunity that is in front of us in the future is answering the question of, is this job seeker right for the employer? And is this employer right for the job seeker?
Yeah.
And as an industry, that gets me very excited because we've spent so much time on job fit and experience, but not so much on all of these other things around a company: career growth, pay, management, all the value alignment, all the things when we're interviewing that's so important whether or not we hire someone. And I think that's where we can unlock a lot of potential long term, is focusing on that side of the equation.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, those are all the things that really sort of determine the success or not success of a particular relationship. It's and those are the things that are really really hard to sort of measure or glean ahead of time, and they're the hardest things to sort of pull out through the interview process. But at the same time, if you crack that code, I completely agree. That foundation for long-term relationships and growth is absolutely there and can be a real game changer for job seekers and folks that are hiring as well. So very interesting there. The other piece that you mentioned earlier is that speed is such a critical factor that you could be in an interview process and lose a candidate if you're if you're not fast enough. So I'm curious, is there something to be said for automating the redundant tasks in terms of helping healthcare organizations in general find more time for those meaningful human connections? Is there something to be said for that technology actually helping in terms of that speed to hire?
Absolutely, 100%. Should be something as a business we're all focused on right now. How can we get back to the basics of growing our business through eliminating redundant tasks that just bog us down in a lot of, you know, in a lot of necessary but redundant processes? Totally agree. I think that is one of the ideas. When we built Ready Set Hire, the whole idea was not all businesses have a talent acquisition team.
That's true.
And what if we could infuse all of the best practices of a talent acquisition team into a hiring platform and into a recruitment marketing platform? How do you write a job ad? What's required? How much should I pay this person based on the location? How can we book an interview quickly by syncing calendars without having to, again, the ping pong, like everything that you think about that happens when you're looking to connect with a candidate? How can we automate that process? And I agree that we should automate as much as we can, because at the end of the day, we are still in human resources and we want to connect with people. And our job should be to make those decisions to hire through the connection of the candidate. And anything that we can do to ensure that we are spending more time with candidates and less time, as I said earlier, with the redundant tasks, should be the North Star of any human resources or talent acquisition department.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, right? Because in sort of the healthcare delivery side of the equation here, we're hearing so much about the day to day tasks from an administrative perspective for doctors and nurses and so on and so forth being automated to give more time back to the patients at the bedside. I think it's just a fascinating parallel that we're talking about the same thing, kind of on the job seekers and recruiter side of the fence as well. That seems to be sort of a universal benefit if we can crack that code in terms of AI.
Well, I think it's going to be even more important long term in this new world that we're in. I read I think it was Forbes mentioned that roughly about 30 to 40% of job seekers were using AI to help with their job search.
Wow.
And it was great. It was a great article. And some of that is personalizing a resume to a job. Some of that was probably mass apply, which is not good. And our opinion, because, it takes out the respectful connection that, most people experience when they apply for a job, instead of spamming
Right.
their resume out to many. It's a respectful experience, right? You've researched a company, you want to put your best foot forward, you're excited about it. But this sort of happens because for years, as an industry, we have not been respectful to job seekers.
Right.
Right, we haven't been respectful to job seekers, and now they're not being respectful to us, because how many times we've applied to jobs and we've never heard back, or how many times has it taken weeks and you've had to move on. So there's kind of an interesting dynamic. There's interesting psychology right now around the job seekers process mirroring the employer's process now that some of these tools are more available. Fascinating. But when we think about that idea of how AI can change how we connect and how we reach the right buyers, reach the right talent, reach the right customers, that to me means we need to hit a home run on the service aspect. And if we hit a home run on the service aspect, then we will be very successful in ensuring that that is the way, we grow. And I think it becomes even more important now than ever before, because people are going to yearn for that connection. People
Right.
are going to need that human connection because of how so much of the things we're doing as a society is now being automated. And I think there's a time and the place, but service is what will be the game changer, and that connection will be the game changer moving forward.
So that's obviously a big piece of kind of where you see the future going then in healthcare staffing, especially. I'm curious if there's anything else on that front that you think is noteworthy in terms of trends with technology or trends with job seekers or recruiters or anything in the space looking forward that you think is going to be interesting.
One of our most successful products in how companies judge ROI and return on recruitment investment is in-person hiring events.
Interesting.
And when you think of,
Really?
yes, it's incredible. And when you think of, this idea of anything that we can do to get to humans, or anything that we can do to bridge that connection from a real standpoint is going to be very powerful. That's a great example of it. We'll have a customer who will organize a hiring event, have a couple talent acquisition leader, hiring manager, a couple hiring managers, and say, hey, we're going to plan 3 hours for this day, and we're going to allow job seekers to show up. 2:00, pick your time, 2:00, 3:00, here are the directions. And the show rate of the people showing up for that hiring event is generally around anywhere between 20 and 30%. So, you have some people that just won't show.
Right.
But the people that do show, they are engaged, they want to meet you. And many of our customers will give, offers on site
Wow. On the spot.
from the hiring event, on the spot. And it's one of their lowest cost per hire initiatives. Now, the key is it's different, right? You've got to marshal resources to have folks, conduct a hiring event for a half a day, and you've got to marshal resources, and there's some organization that needs to happen within your business to be able to accomplish that. But when they do that and then they advertise at that hiring event, it works.
It's really
And so it's really
fascinating.
interesting. But a hiring event isn't going to work if you just say, hey, we're going to have a hiring event 4 hours and hope people show up, right? That
Right.
doesn't
Right.
work. You've got to put some marketing muscle behind it to get people to show up. But to me, that's another example of like, hey, I can go online and search for jobs, find a job, apply for it, or I could just show up and here's a link to the Google map.
It's really interesting. I mean, because what you're describing is almost like it's multi-channel. It's each of these sort of elements of the job search and the job recruitment sort of angle. It's not necessarily that they're super like new and novel, but it sounds like there's so much more like connective tissue that turns all of this into a really comprehensive strategy at the end of the day, rather than just we post our job on the job board, and as job seekers we go and, to your point, kind of carpet bomb the market with our resume. we see a job fair and we kind of stumble into it, that there's some real thoughtfulness in terms of how sort of one element of the strategy interacts with and impacts all the others. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And all of these things are important to accomplish your hiring goals and to meet your initiatives that you have set out, for your growth plan. Very important to think about it that way, and why a lot of companies use advertising agencies to help orchestrate and design that strategy to be effective.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I know we're almost out of time here, so I'll ask if there's anything kind of to wrap up that you're excited about, that you're working on, anything else at all that you'd like to share with the community.
Well, we're working on a lot of interesting things right now. And again, as I mentioned, it's mostly generative AI based, and how we think about creating a better experience for candidates and a focused and qualified experience for employers. So stay tuned. We would love to have you check out Ready Set Hire, and happy to help you from an enterprise perspective at Talroo as well. I really appreciate the time here today, and wish you all great success in your future endeavors.
This is great, Thad. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Really appreciate the invite, Chris. Thank you.
Absolutely. I hope you'll come back and talk to us as you do more with the platform, and because this world is going to be changing rapidly. So I hope you come back and give us an update at some point.
Thank you.
And thank you also to our listeners. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep growing the show. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Taylor Healthcare and the digital healthcare experience, you can go to taylor.com/digital-healthcare. That's it for our show today. And until next time, I'm Chris Civitarice, wishing you health and good cheer. Take care.
To learn more about Taylor Healthcare, please visit taylor.com/digital-healthcare. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice or services. The digital healthcare experience is produced by Naomi Schwimmer. Podcast music by Nicholas Bach.
The more engaged the patient, the better the outcome. But how do you help patients get engaged? Introducing iMed Health from Taylor Healthcare, digital tools that increase patient engagement at every touchpoint. Go to imedhealth.com to learn more. Find the link in the show notes.